In the stage of Israel's history, filled with dramatic events and decisive turns, chapter 18 of the first book of Kings stands out as a moment of intense faith, hope, and manifestation of divine power. This episode is intrinsically linked to the reign of Ahab, a monarch notoriously known for his apostasy and for leading Israel down paths of idolatry and disobedience to God. Amidst this scenario of spiritual deviation emerges the central figure of Elijah, the prophet, a man whose faith and courage are tested in the face of one of the greatest challenges of his prophetic mission. The climax of this confrontation between Elijah's true prophethood and the prophets of Baal, servants of an idolatrous belief, unfolds under a sky that, for a long time, remained closed to any sign of rain. It is in this context that a small yet significant sign manifests on the horizon. A cloud, as small as a man's hand, beginning to rise from the sea. This modest phenomenon not only heralds an imminent change in Israel's physical climate, but also symbolizes a profound spiritual transformation, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the history of faith and the people's relationship with the God of Israel. The episode described in 1 Kings 18 occurs during a turbulent period in the history of Israel, specifically in the reign of Ahab. This era is marked by political tensions, religious conflicts, and a growing distance of the people of Israel from the precepts and worship of the God of their ancestors. Ahab, who ascended to the throne around the end of the 9th century BC, is often remembered as one of the most infamous kings of Israel due to his tendency towards idolatry, influenced mainly by his wife, Jezebel. Jezebel, a Phoenician princess, brings to Israel the worship of Baal, a Canaanite god associated with fertility and storms. Her influence over Ahab leads to the official promotion of Baal worship, resulting in the construction of temples and altars dedicated to this pagan deity throughout the kingdom. This movement distances the Israelites from the teachings and laws of Moses, causing a significant spiritual and moral decline. In this context of apostasy, Elijah emerges as a central figure of resistance and prophecy. His presence and actions represent a direct challenge not only to the authority of Ahab and Jezebel, but also to the cultural and religious prevalence of Baal worship. The prolonged drought in Israel, prophesied by Elijah, is a physical reflection of the spiritual drought the country was facing. The lack of rain for several years is seen as divine judgment, a tangible sign of God's disapproval of the direction the kingdom had taken. The confrontation on Mount Carmel, as narrated in 1 Kings 18, represents one of the most dramatic and significant moments in Israel's biblical history. This confrontation is not just a clash between different religious beliefs, but also a decisive moment of demonstration of God's power against idolatry. Mount Carmel, located in the north of Israel, becomes the stage for this extraordinary dispute. Elijah, the prophet of God, challenges the prophets of Baal, who were supported by Queen Jezebel and her husband King Ahab. Elijah's challenge is direct and audacious, that both groups build an altar and place a sacrifice upon it, but not light the fire. Instead, each should invoke their God to send fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice. The prophets of Baal accept the challenge and spend hours in fervent rituals, calling on Baal, but there is no response. No sign of fire or divine manifestation occurs. Elijah, observing the futility of their efforts, even mocks them, suggesting that perhaps their God was busy or distracted. Then it's Elijah's turn. He restores the altar of the Lord that had been torn down, and to further demonstrate the supremacy of God's power, orders that water be poured over the altar, thoroughly soaking both the sacrifice and the wood. Elijah prays to the Lord, asking God to reveal his sovereignty and that the people recognize that he is the true God. God's response is immediate and spectacular. Fire from heaven descends, consuming not only the sacrifice, but also the wood, the stones, the dust, and even the water in the trench around the altar. This miracle prompts an immediate reaction from the people, who fall in recognition of the Lord's sovereignty, exclaiming, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." This event on Mount Carmel is crucial, as it represents a turning point in the fight against idolatry in Israel. Elijah, through this demonstration of faith and divine power, not only challenges the authority of the prophets of Baal, but also reaffirms the presence and supremacy of the God of Israel. This episode is a testament to God's faithfulness to his people and the truth of his word, marking a moment of renewal and return to monotheistic faith among the Israelites. After the dramatic confrontation on Mount Carmel, the biblical account in 1 Kings 18 turns its attention to a moment of intense expectation and faith: Elijah's prayer for rain. This act is not just the culmination of a sequence of events marked by the demonstration of God's power, but also a crucial moment of intercession and hope for Israel. With the defeat of the prophets of Baal, Elijah turns to the next major issue afflicting the nation: the severe drought that had plagued the land for 3 years. This drought, as prophesied by Elijah, was a reflection of divine judgment on Israel's idolatry. Now, with the people having recognized again the sovereignty of the God of Israel, it was time to seek restoration and an end to the drought. Elijah climbs to the top of Carmel, placing himself in a position of humble supplication before God. His posture, kneeling and putting his face between his knees, is an expression of deep reverence and urgency in his prayer. He sends his servant to look toward the sea 7 times, demonstrating persistence and faith in God's response. The repetition of this act symbolizes the tenacity and resilience of Elijah's faith. On the 7th time, the servant returns with the news of a small cloud, the size of a man's hand, emerging from the sea. This description is laden with symbolism. The cloud, though small, is the beginning of the divine promise being fulfilled. It represents God's response to Elijah's persistent faith and his mercy towards the people of Israel. The sea, often seen as a place of chaos and uncertainty in the scriptures, is the point of origin of this cloud of hope and blessing. Elijah, upon seeing this sign, understands that rain is on the way. He warns Ahab to prepare and descend from the mountain before the rain hinders his journey. The sky soon darkens with clouds, the wind rises, and a great rain begins to fall on the land. This outcome is not just a physical response to Elijah's prayer, but also a powerful symbol of spiritual renewal. The rain falling on the dry land of Israel is like a cure for the spiritual drought, bringing hope, restoration, and a new beginning for the people. This prayer for rain and its subsequent divine response reaffirm God's authority and care over his creation and his people. They demonstrate that, even after periods of judgment and correction, God is ready to heal and restore when there is repentance and return to him. Elijah's prayer is a powerful reminder of the efficacy of fervent prayer and God's faithfulness to his promises. The appearance of the small cloud in 1 Kings 18:44 carries profound meaning, symbolizing much more than a mere meteorological change. This cloud, emerging after Elijah's fervent prayer, represents the realization of various dimensions of faith, divine providence, and redemptive hope. The cloud is firstly a testimony of God's response to persistent faith and prayer. Elijah, by standing firm in his faith even when there was no sign of rain, exemplifies unwavering trust in God. The appearance of the cloud is therefore a powerful reminder that God responds to those who seek him with sincere and persistent hearts. In the context of a severe drought that plagued the land of Israel, the cloud symbolizes the hope of renewal and restoration. Just as the promised rain would bring new life to the dry and hungry land, the presence of God, symbolized by the cloud, promises a spiritual renewal for a people thirsty for true worship and communion with their Creator. The small cloud, quickly growing and bringing abundant rain, also illustrates God's sovereignty and providence. It demonstrates that even the smallest manifestations can be preludes to great divine works. God is capable of transforming seemingly insignificant situations into powerful acts of blessing and grace. The description of the cloud as small as a man's hand also suggests a contrast between human limitation and God's unlimited power. While the human hand represents the maximum of human reach and capability, the cloud emerging from the sea symbolizes the beginning of something that can only be attributed to divine action, far exceeding human possibilities. In the literary and theological realm, the cloud marks a point of transition in the narrative. After a long period of drought and apostasy, it signals the beginning of a new phase of reconciliation and blessing. Just as rain transforms the arid landscape, God's intervention in the history of Israel promotes a spiritual and physical transformation. In summary, the small cloud in 1 Kings 18:44 is a powerful symbol of faith, hope, renewal, divine sovereignty, and change. It reminds us that even in the most challenging circumstances, there is the potential for the manifestation of God's greatness, and that persistent faith is often rewarded with divine providence.